Hello and welcome to the Mission Recovery Podcast. My name is Maruf Ahmed and I'm the co-founder of Quit Genius, the world's leading digital clinic for substance addictions. I'm going to be speaking to inspiring individuals about their journey to addiction recovery. Recovery should be celebrated, and the goal of Mission Recovery is to break down the stigma surrounding addictions and to empower others to live addiction-free lives. This is Mission Recovery. Hello and welcome to the Mission Recovery Podcast. In today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Justin Kan. Many of you know Justin as he was the co-founder of Justin TV and Twitch, the world's largest video site, which he ultimately sold to Amazon for a cool $1 billion. Justin is also a huge inspiration to me and one of my role models, so I'm so happy to have him on the show. Justin, thank you so much for being here. How have you been?
I'm good. I'm great. Excellent. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. The first observation I have, Justin, is your hair's grown so much since I last spoke to you.
Yeah, it's, I think I've got 2 years now of growth. It's looking good. I got past the awkward stage.
I'm actually struggling to find a hairdressers at the moment during lockdown. So I'm definitely very much in the awkward stage at this moment in time. I'm probably going to have to resort to cutting it myself at some point, Justin. But before we jump into things, Justin, I should start by congratulating you on the launch of your podcast, The Quest. I've been following it and it's been amazing. The latest episode with Jason Marr was very profound. I bet that's been keeping you very busy lately.
Yeah, it's been fun. That one was pretty wild, right? Like he has some amazing stories, such a dynamic and colorful, but really good human being.
100%. I don't think I've ever listened to a podcast longer than an hour other than that episode. So props to you for keeping me engaged that whole time, and Jason as well. So for the listeners, I should add a bit of context on as to how I know Justin. So Justin and I met when Quit Genius was just getting started at Y Combinator. And Justin was a mentor to myself, my co-founders, and everyone else in the batch. And my distinct memories of my interactions with you, Justin, were pestering you every other week to invest in Quit Genius.
Yes, I love your persistence, Roof, and I love what you're doing. The mission is great. The persistence is great. And I feel like you guys are onto something really powerful.
No, appreciate it, Justin. And there's still time to invest. I'll be pestering you again for when the Series B comes about. Justin, I'd love to start initially with the amazing story of you founding Twitch. So please tell us, how did it all start?
Sure. So I'll give the quick overview because I know, we want to cover a lot of stuff. So, Justin TV started off as our second startup. We had one in Y Combinator beforehand that was called Kiko. It was a web calendar. And with our second startup, Justin TV, it started off as us almost like a wild lark. We were just saying, we had this idea to create our own live video feed, 24/7 live video, and of my life, kind of running around San Francisco trying to build a startup. And so that was what we did, and we launched it back in 2007. It turns out it was not the biggest smash hit that we thought it would be. It was kind of like people would show up and they were like, wow, this show is boring, right? Like it turns out the things that you do in starting a startup are not that interesting to watch. And so we luckily turned it into a platform for anyone to broadcast live video. And from there, worked on that. It grew Justin TV to be a top 250 website in the world. And then eventually pivoted to Twitch, which was a category on Justin TV. It was like the gaming category on Justin TV. And my co-founder, Emmett Shear, and our COO, Kevin Lin, really loved that content. And so they were like, hey, let's work on this. And eventually we grew it and grew it and became the Twitch that everybody knows and loves today. And is now, a pretty big company inside of Amazon in its own right.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge company. And congrats once again to all your success there. And then after that, Justin, I'd love to touch on the stint that you had at Y Combinator as a partner. So do you mind just talking a little bit about that experience and how it was to help so many successful companies?
Sure. Yeah. So since then, I've been an investor, in Silicon Valley, first at Y Combinator, and now I have my own fund called Go Capital. And really the common thread is just investing in early stage startups and trying to help those founders grow their businesses and get off the ground, try to get them launched, right? It's like a landing strip or something like that, where we're trying to get people, their startups launched in the stratosphere. And so really enjoy helping companies. I think some of the highlights for me are the ability to just mentor people who are dynamic and excited and building something that they think can change the world. That's one. And then I love learning. I find that the work of being an investor is like forever fascinating, and that's why I like it so much. Plus, I mean, it's an easy job. Let's be honest.
Oh man, yeah, I'd love to at some point be on the other end of the pitching panel, because yeah, being a founder can be tough at times. I know we're going to speak about that in a bit of detail, but one quick story I want to touch on before we jump into the meat of things, and that's obviously you've helped a number of successful companies as a mentor, none bigger than Airbnb. So you're going to have to tell the listeners the story of how you got Airbnb into YC.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say that like I did almost nothing. So I deserve like very little credit. I think there's a lot of, whenever any company becomes successful, people come out of the woodwork to credit claim. And that's like, I want to make it clear that I did almost nothing. My co-founder, Michael, did a lot. And Michael was mentoring the Airbnb guys in the early days, and they would come over to our office and he would give them advice like on product and stuff like that. And one time they'd come over, this was in 2008, the fall or winter of 2008, and they were pretty discouraged. They had launched the site a couple times. They had almost no customers. It was not working, and they were going to give up. And we were actually celebrating at the time that night. We had just closed a big advertising deal. I think it was with Microsoft. And so we said, "Oh, we're going out to dinner. Do you guys want to come?" And so Joe and Brian, who were two of the three founders, they were the ones who were actually in San Francisco at the time, said, "Okay, we'll come to dinner." And we went to dinner, and I said, actually, my co-founder Emmett said, "Hey, you should think about doing Y Combinator because you have nothing to lose. Basically, there's nothing to lose." And they were like, "Oh, isn't Y Combinator for startups that haven't launched yet? We've already launched." And we were like, "No, it's for everybody, early stage. So you should consider doing it." And so on my phone, I went to Y Combinator's website, and it said the applications were closed. And so they were excited about it. And we talked to them. They were excited about it. And I emailed from dinner, like it was a Palm Pilot at the time, like a Palm Trio or something. I emailed Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, who was running it at the time, and said, "Hey, you should take a look at this company. We think they have revenue. They're pretty good. These founders are like pretty excited." And he emailed back, and I was like, "The application is closed, but could you take a look at them?" And he emailed back and said, "Yes, I'll if they apply tonight." And so I told Brian and Joe, and then they went home that night, like immediately. They were like excited. They went home and they filled out the application. And eventually, then they got an interview, they got into YC. And then that's really what made them kind of get the kickstart to really go to New York and really kickstart Airbnb's community there. And then the rest is history.
A very, very important email, and obviously now they're public, and yeah, I think you're very much being humble, but definitely a lot of credit has to go to you because they're very open about how Y Combinator was such a big part of their success. Now, Justin, you've been very public about your experience with alcohol, and if you don't mind, I'd like to dive into it a little bit more today. So let's maybe rewind to the beginning, if it's okay with yourself, Justin. And do you mind just talking about your first interactions with alcohol and how it all started?
Yeah. So first thing I should say is like, I love alcohol. Like I love drinking. I haven't had a drink in 2 years, but I love drinking. And I don't know if that'll ever change, but I had my first drink when I was 13, I want to say. I was in 8th grade, and I was on a flight for like this class trip that my class took. And it turns out like we could get alcohol from the stewardess. So I had my first drink. It was a screwdriver, orange juice and vodka, and had the drink and like kind of felt this like warm feeling. And that was my first drink I ever had. And then when I was in high school, I went to parties or whatever with friends. I didn't drink that much, but I, did drink. And my cousin, I remember, would give me like schnapps or something like that, like Bailey's and like mint schnapps, like disgusting drinks, but they were ones that almost like as a kid, like I liked. And so I drank in high school, and then I drank in college. I drank heavily in college. Like I was drinking five nights a week. And really at that point it was really a way for me. I'm an extrovert, or I'm kind of an ambivert, but I'm more on the extroverted side, and I always wanted to connect with people. And for me, I was always shy though when I was a kid, and so alcohol was a way that I could drink, and it was like boom. I was, before alcohol, I was Clark Kent, and then when I drank, it was like I was fucking Superman, And so for me, alcohol was a way I could be confident. I could be the person I wanted to be. I was funny. I was confident. I could talk to other people. I felt like I could connect with other people, and so that was the crutch, and that's what really made me love it so much. And I think that's why, I drank heavily through college and then beyond that, like well into my professional adult life.
I guess, at what point did you think in your head, Justin, damn, this is a problem and I need to do something about it?
Well, sort of thinking that like pretty early on, right? Because by the time I was in college, and then, kind of afterwards, and I was starting startups. Like I never had a job, so I was always starting startups. I would, in college, I was like drinking a lot and getting blackout drunk and just waking up, in my bed, like clothes on, contacts in, fairly regularly. Or my college roommates nicknamed me 9:59 because I'd pass out before 10 p.m. Like oftentimes I'd like start drinking like at 8 and just be donezo in like 2 hours. And, then so that was like kind of a problem, but it wasn't like the environment of college in America is kind of like that's happened. Like a lot of people are doing that. So you don't really feel like, oh, this is like alcohol addiction, right? You feel like, oh, this is just what people do. So then I got out into the professional world, and I'm like building my startup. I'm running startups, and I was still drinking a lot. Like we would unwind, drink, and I remember like things that were stressful. I would drink when like to de-stress. So in the early days when I started my first company, is a company called Kiko, I would like have a nightcap. I started like drinking at night, like right before bed, because I was stressed out about things. I having relationship problems or startup problems, whatever it was. I would drink before bed. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird, right? That's like not healthy necessarily. It seemed like kind of like, but there was also like a romanticization of it in my mind, right? I was like, oh, I'm like a man, and I'm like, this is how I like get out my feelings or whatever. So then later on, I would like drink super heavily when like things went bad in startups. So like I remember years later, like an employee quitting, right? Like a key employee quit one of my companies, and I like drank a fifth of gin, no, a fifth of Jameson, like by myself, almost like probably like 90% of the bottle. And I was just completely obliterated. Like I was like crying, rolling around on my bedroom floor, my living room floor. And, it was like pretty like rough. Right. Like, and so, that was kind of just how I got out I've always like escaped from my present moment circumstances whenever things emotionally got too tough. So, I was always difficult. It was very difficult for me to sit with my emotions, for my feelings of maybe anxiety or sadness or regret. And I would drink as a way to escape from them. And then, kind of continued that on. And over time, actually, when I got into my 30s, my drinking kind of was less. I was less like doing, kind of outrageous, I mean, there was a lot of like stories in there, probably like any random person who drinks a lot, where I would like get into fights or like do things I wasn't proud of, or like, whatever, get blackout and do just like degenerate, terrible things. And then finally, when I was in my 30s, it kind of tapered off. I was getting older, like hangovers were getting worse. I just like I wasn't getting as messed up as I used to, but it was still like a lot. I was still like, I'm drinking 3 drinks a week at night. At dinner, I'll just like have a drink, then have dinner, whatever. And like, I'll wake up in the morning and just feel exhausted. Like it really was like occupying a lot of my time. Right. And so at a certain point, I just said, hey, like this is too much. I kind of realized it was this crutch, and I quit and decided to quit. And at that point, I love drinks, and I probably drank 10,000 drinks in my whole life, or more, maybe like 15,000. Like like I loved all drinks. I loved champagne and the celebration of that. I love whiskey and I love vodka, gin, like all spirits. I love beer. I love shitty beer, like Miller Lite, all the way through like craft beers. And I love wine. So, I mean, I really did love drinking, a lot. And so to me, but I had kind of tried every type of drinking, every variation. I tried every way to limit my drinking. I tried, okay, I'm only going to drink beer. I'm just going to drink one drink a night. I'm just going to drink on the weekend, and it never worked. Right. And I had tried to quit several times or like say, oh, I need a detox. So I'm going to quit for a month or 3 months or whatever. And I always felt like I was white knuckling it the whole time.
Yeah.
Like I was I got to get through this 3 months and then I'm going to come, then I'm going to go hard again or whatever. I'll be okay. I'm going to get straight for a little while and then I can, go back to it just to prove I can control it. But then I'd be like really stressing every day. I was like, oh, I need a drink, or I started smoking weed a lot one time then when I was trying to quit drinking. So, it was hard.
And it's interesting that you're using the terminology like loving drinking. And it's something that I've heard before as well. But I guess like when you then went from there and loving drinking to that trigger in your mind when you're like, hey, I need to stop. What did you then like miss the most about drinking for the next like 6 or so months?
Yeah. So actually when I said I'm going to quit and I'm never going to drink again, it became much easier to quit because before it was always like, oh, I'm going to take a pause, but then it's like, oh, it's coming back. But when I said I'm going to quit, I'm never going to drink again because it's destructive for me in my life and I can love it and still recognize it's destructive. Then to me, it was very easy to say, well, I mean, it was much easier, relatively easy to say, okay, I'm going to stop. And it was about 3 months where I was like, okay, I kind of craved it, but after 3 months, the cravings were gone for me. I was also exercising a lot, which I think helped because not drinking really made me like able to exercise in the morning, like very regularly, a lot. And so that helped me quite a bit.
And I've heard from a number of folk on how exercise can help a lot with craving. So that's really, really helpful to hear. And I guess like on top of that, Justin, when you did decide that you did want to quit, how did you go about doing it? What did you end up doing to quit? Was it just a momentary like decision, or did you end up seeking support to help you on that journey?
Well, so I did something that I hear you're not supposed to do, and you're probably more the expert than I am, so you can tell me. I was like, I know what works for me is that I am a person who cares a lot what other people think, right? Which is not a super attractive thing to admit, but I'm comfortable with myself now, and so I can say it. And so I'm like, I'm going to announce publicly, like on social media and to my friends, I'm going to never drink again. And here's my history with drinking. I'm never drinking again. So here's my journey and we'll see what happens. And that was like kind of, and then that was one thing. And then the second thing was I used a habit tracker like a streak tracker to track my streaks. And so I could see, oh, it was like one day, day one, I press this button, day two, press this button. So I could see it building up. And those were the two techniques that I used to kind of keep myself dry. And it really worked, it worked for me. But I hear that you're not supposed to announce it to other people because then if you relapse, it's like, extra bad. You don't want to tell anyone about it or anything. So I don't know if that's the right strategy for everyone.
No, absolutely. I think with this, Justin, it's whatever works best for yourself. And like you said, because you announced it to everyone, obviously you've got a big following on Twitter, you created that social accountability, which worked for yourself. And like you said, you know yourself better than anyone else. So absolutely, like that is definitely a great technique. But then also I'm really interested on the second technique that you mentioned on using this Streaks app and that habit tracker, because actually, if we break that down, that's in essence the core of behavior change, trying to change a habit and addressing the psychological part of your addiction, if we quote unquote addiction, because there are often these two parts to addiction, right? The physical part of addiction that most people give a lot of time to and give the spotlight to, but that psychological part is often, I guess, neglected. And right. It's interesting to see how, I guess you started with that and how that was so successful, because that often is the core to a lot of cravings, because you have that trigger, you see that friend that you always drink with, and then you want to have a drink. So it's really interesting how you started with that and how that was so successful.
Yeah, so I would say to break it down into the psychological versus physiological. So on the physiological side, I think exercise was the way that I addressed that, right? Because it was like a
Mm,
good feeling in contrast to what I was doing before, which was like not exercising as regularly or like really struggling with exercising in the morning because I was like hungover. And then in the terms of the psychological, I really do think I started there. That's a good observation where the streak is almost like it's you're opening. It's very simple. It's a psychological trick. You open this app in a habit tracker, and then you press a button, and then it makes a little sound, and then that's it, right? Like, and it shows you how many days in a row you did that thing. So you can use it for positive habits, like you want to meditate every day, or you can use it for a negative habit, like I want to quit drinking, right? And the interesting thing for me about it was it's like a little gamification on a real world thing. It's like not that important, but it's just that little nudge. And so that really helped me kind of create a positive feedback loop around not drinking and pressing this button. And other if like AA or something like that has a similar thing, right? Where it's like tokens or chips, right? Like you get your like 1 day chip or 1 month or whatever. It's like the same thing. It's like gamification for your real life. And in fact, I like that technique so much that I built a habit tracker app with some friends that's called Kin. You can check it out. It's live now at kinapp.co.
mm.
And to encapsulate some of the social accountability and habit formation stuff that we were always excited about, that we saw in other apps, but really combining them into one habit tracking app. And so it's a free app, and I just, it's not a startup, it's a labor of love, just a project. And so you can check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how a lot of these techniques that you've been using and that you almost came across by default actually have a really big evidence base behind them. So there's a lot of research behind all of this, like gamification in changing health behavior, changing your like habits, and as a result of that, addressing the psychological part of addiction, but also that social side of things and everything that comes with social accountability, whether that's sharing it with your Twitter followers, or I know you also created that Telegram group for a number of other people where you can almost share feelings and share thoughts and share experiences that others are going through, so you can really relate to them. So it's really interesting how you've almost like done all of this and amalgamated all of this, but there's a lot of evidence base behind all of this that you've done.
That's funny. Yeah, it was really about figuring out, kind of doing it live, right? I wasn't looking anything up. I just kind of tried a bunch of things and figured out what worked for me. And I think actually one thing I'll say is adding the social accountability, like really announcing it both publicly, but also to my friends and family helped a lot because I think they were very supportive, right? Like I wasn't pressured to drink at events. People were like understanding. And in fact, a number of my friends who were heavy drinkers also quit or did like a long extended, like, they quit for like 6 months or like permanently. And it's been nice to be on that journey with other people, because have someone who's at that your stage to relate to. So it was surprising because like me and one of my other friends, we're like probably the biggest drinkers of our friend group, but and the people you would least expect to quit, but when we quit, it was everyone was very supportive. And I think creating that, not making it a solo journey really helped me stay consistent.
And I think definitely the support from others, from friends and family, really creates that social accountability. But it's interesting how you didn't go about getting any, I guess, and I use this in quote marks, but expert support from like a therapist or potentially a physician. Did that ever like cross your mind at any point?
Not really, to be honest. I wasn't like, I think there are people who are, my alcohol addiction was not, I wouldn't say it was like critical. Like I'm very functional, I was very functional.
Mm.
It wasn't, I wasn't at my lowest point. It wasn't like a part where I was like having real serious health concerns or anything like that yet. Who knows what would happen. But so I felt like it was never out of, like I would have times of out of control, but it wasn't like, oh, my life is spiraling and down the drain or something like that. And so for me, I think it just seemed like something, oh, I should be able to do this. And I just was, I never even crossed my mind like to get more support. I had been to AA before actually, and like years prior, and I didn't find it like it was interesting, but like it didn't stick. Like I only went to one meeting. And so, I don't know. At this time I just said like, oh, it just seemed like something I could do.
I love how you've been so vocal about this, Justin. You've shared this on Twitter. And I think figures like yourself speaking about this really helps, I guess, break down the stigma surrounding alcohol and everything around the relationship with alcohol. One thing that I thought was quite interesting that you said was that you did this for, the social accountability, getting the support from the friends and families that you had around yourself, which turned out to be a really successful method. But I was curious, because of the stigma surrounding alcohol addiction and everything around alcohol, were you ever hesitant about posting this on Twitter? And was there ever a time that you were like, oh man, should I post this or not?
Well, I mean, you are talking to the guy who streamed his life 24/7 to the internet. So I wasn't like, I didn't feel that hesitant at all. No. I think is more actually that, I thought, oh man, like there's this stigma, from when I grew up, when I was in high school and college, it's like the guy, if you didn't drink, that's like fucking lame. Right. So it was more like, oh, what am I going to be? Am I going to be fun? Is it going to be fun? Am I going to be able to go out and like dance? Like, could I dance sober? Right. Like those were more of my hesitations than kind of like how I announced it to people or being public about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you're used to the limelight and the spotlight, so that sort of makes sense. And I guess since you've quit, which is as you said, 2 years now, how's your life changed, Justin?
We just have so much more hours in the day, first of all, right? Like cutting out all drinking. Like I can wake up in the morning. I'm like I've exercised every day for the last 2 years in some form. And that's impossible if you're drinking heavily. So I feel like I'm in the best health shape ever, from a health perspective. I feel like actually I've lost a lot of weight. Well, maybe not a lot, but like I'm just like feel a lot healthier. And that's kind of another thing. And then in terms of like just doing things that are just, occasionally just getting completely blotto and doing something really stupid, like that risk is completely mitigated, which is amazing, So, I mean, I don't judge, I don't sit in judgment of people who drink, right? Like I love drinking and I think there's a lot of benefits that are, kind of short-term benefits, I should say, that are from drinking in society, right? The way we structured our society today. I do think it's important to kind of show an alternative perspective of like, hey, you can have a really healthy, amazing, beautiful, fun, entertaining, exciting life without drinking. And so, that's kind of one of my things I hope to do through being more public about it.
And that's I definitely commend you for doing that, Justin. And I guess like how has that then had a knock-on impact on your family, you now being sober for 2 years?
I think it's improved my relationship with my family for sure. Like, no, there's no question about that. Like, I'm just a better husband, better father, better person, and I think drinking, I was often using drinking to escape emotional experiences that I felt were tough, right? Like, so if I felt sad or upset about something, I'd drink, right? Even if I wasn't getting completely blotto, like, okay, I'll have a few drinks, right? And the interesting thing is like, when you don't have that option, for me, I've been forced to confront the experience of sadness or anger or anxiety, and then, and be okay being with who I am in my present moment experience. And I think it's very important in terms of my own personal growth, spiritual growth, emotional growth, just to be able to be present with my experience and not fight against it, not want things to be different, not look for an escape. And that's been a very powerful thing for me.
I remember you telling me that meditation has helped you a lot over the last 2 years. So how did you, I guess, get into that in the first place?
Yeah, so around the same time, actually, I quit drinking, maybe a little bit before I started meditating regularly, and started off with a transcendental meditation. Actually, I started off with Headspace, for a couple weeks, and then did transcendental meditation, or TM, which is a mantra-based meditation. And then from there, kind of found Vipassana meditation, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Yeah.
And so you mentioned before, alcohol was almost that vice when you were stressed, when you were anxious. Has meditation now replaced that, or are there other techniques that you're now using to cope with, negative emotions like stress and anxiety?
Well, meditation, it's interesting because it hasn't replaced it in the same sense as like when I'm stressed out, I meditate. It's like more meditation is the practice that allows you to see your present moment experience. So, oh, I feel this. Sometimes I might feel sadness or anger before and never even know it. But now I'm like, oh, I feel this. And does it appear in the body? And what is the experience of being sad or angry or whatever? And do I need things to be different? And then the answer being, oh, I don't necessarily need to. I can be with this experience. And then, of course, it passes because the human body is not designed to maintain emotion for like days or weeks or years, right? Like usually you're angry, and then 5 minutes later, assuming the threat has passed, you have a calm mind after, if you're able to be with it and let it pass. If you're ruminating and you're spinning yourself up over and over again, you're like, oh, fuck this guy. He did this thing to me, and I'm really mad about it. And then you just keep in that thought cycle, that thought loop. Then you can be angry for a long, long time until it becomes a mood, right? And so for me, meditation, it's not like it was a direct replacement for alcohol in that I would, be angry, drink, or be upset, drink. And then I would go be upset, meditate. It's more like it gave me the skill to just be upset and then let that upset pass and not be not be sucked along with it.
That makes a ton of sense. And then when you did experience those emotions such as sadness and anxiety, how did you then, I guess, tackle those like in these last 2 years?
Yeah. So it's really just doing the mindfulness technique of seeing, like hearing, kind of feeling it in the body. Like, what does it feel like? What is this experience? Being curious about it. What's causing this? Like, what about my past is making me react this way, like generating these reactive feelings, today, being curious about it, inquisitive. And then my experience is usually then it passes,
Yeah.
There's this Buddhist analogy, I guess, for meditation, or that meditation is, your thought, you're like a river, right? Your experience consciousness is like a river, and you experience this flowing river of emotions, thoughts, perceptions and physiological experiences, like all of these, like these experiences are floating by you. And then usually you're in the river, right? You're unconscious. You don't know, you're getting swept along. Like something happens that makes you angry, and then you're angry and you're upset and you're like pulled along. And meditation is really the practice that gets you out of the river, and you're standing on the riverbanks. You still experience anger and sadness and upset and whatever else it is, or the joy and all these other things, but you're not pulled along with them. You're right. There's a disconnection there. And that's my experience. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm still a novice in this path, but that's really what's helped me a lot.
No, appreciate you sharing that, Justin. And yeah, very, very profound and deep. So thank you so much for that. And just to end, I guess, what advice do you have for others who are out there who want to improve their relationship with alcohol?
Yeah. So for me, and it's different for every person, but for me, black and white was easier than making the choice every day, right? Like I tried techniques of saying, oh, I'm going to limit my drinking to this number of days a week or this amount of drinks a day. And having to use willpower was too hard because I have a limited willpower. So I was saying, oh, I'm going to stop after this one. That's hard. But saying I'm never going to drink, that's easy. So that was, for me, that was a big breakthrough in quitting. That's one. And then the second is, if I think I was somebody who, and I still consider myself somebody who loves alcohol. And, so hopefully my ability to quit is inspirational for many people out there who want to make a change as well. I'm just one person, but, work for me, even though I was someone who was very firmly entrenched in the alcohol culture,
I couldn't agree with you more there, Justin. And I'm sure this story will help so many others, inspire so many others, break down that stigma around addiction. And there will be others out there that can quit in the same vein that you quit, using the techniques that you used and the Streaks apps and the psychological forms of changing your behavior. And there'll be others that, as we mentioned, that are on the other side of the addiction spectrum that may need some added support. And that's really what we're trying to do here at Quit Genius, and is to make that, I guess, evidence-based support easy to access and affordable for everyone out there who does need that support, because unfortunately it's actually a problem that's far more common than we know at this moment in time. So Justin, I'd just like to end by thanking you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you spending the time with me and being so open about your experiences.
Beautiful. I love the mission and I wish you the best, Maru. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Justin, just to end as well, please can you let everyone know the links for folks to find you and your podcast?
Oh yeah, so you can find my Twitter at Justin Kahn. That's Kan, and my podcast is called The Quest. It's on iTunes and or Apple and Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And you can check out that app Kin, my habit tracking app at kinapp.co.
So that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it and thank you for tuning in. You can find out more about Quit Genius on quitgenius.com and the podcast on missionrecoverypodcast.com. If you've enjoyed our content, I'd really appreciate if you could subscribe and consider leaving us a review. Thank you.